The Mysterious Old Radio Listening Society podcast.
Welcome to the Mysterious Old Radio Listening Society, a podcast dedicated to suspense, crime, and horror stories from the golden age of radio. I'm Eric.
I'm Tim.
And I'm Joshua.
We love mysterious old-time radio stories, but do they stand the test of time? That's what we're here to find out.
Today, we return to the listener library for a recommendation from our mysterious listener and Patreon supporter, Anna.
Anna writes, "Hello, I adore your show, and it has helped me get through COVID. You all are so funny." Oh, stop. "And have such a great rapport. I don't think you've done Clarissa from Quiet Please yet. I would love to hear what you think actually happened in the story."
Quiet Please was the brainchild of radio and screenwriter Willis Cooper, creator of another iconic radio series, Lights Out. Quiet Please debuted on the Mutual Broadcasting Network on June 8, 1947. In September 1948, the series switched to ABC and remained there until its final broadcast on June 25, 1949.
Every Quiet Please story was told in the first person by actor Ernest Chappell. Cooper's scripts utilized Chappell's everyman voice and natural gift for storytelling to create a sense of intimacy between performer and listener. This synergy between Cooper's scripts and Chappell's performances were arguably the program's greatest strength.
Quiet Please is often categorized as horror, likely due to the notoriety of Cooper's masterpiece, The Thing on the Forble Board. But in reality, Quiet Please presented stories in a wide variety of styles: comedy, romance, science fiction, and even fantasy. No matter what the genre, though, every Quiet Please story had one thing in common: a slow, deliberately eerie pace.
So with no further ado, here is Clarissa from Quiet Please, first broadcast April 19th, 1948.
It's late at night, and a chill has set in. You're alone, and the only light you see is coming from an antique radio. Listen to the sounds coming from the speaker. Listen to the music, and listen to the voices.
Quiet, please. The Mutual Broadcasting System presents Quiet Please, which is written and directed by Willis Cooper and which features Ernest Chappell. Quiet Please for tonight is called Clarissa. No. He was dead before the fire started. I've told you that a dozen times. No, I can't prove it, of course not. You'll just have to believe me. Take my word for it. I can't prove he was dead. You can't prove he wasn't. And anyway, what difference does it make? Now, I'm sorry. I can't hear you very well. Yes. Well, all right. It was an old black shell of a house. A house that has lived too long. A house where the floors groaned in pain at night, where the windows shuddered at the gentlest touch of the wind. Where door latches suddenly gave up their grip and let the night come sniffing into the house to paw at your eyes and wake you to the other silences that lay around you. It was never warm there. In the winter, old Heinz kept a fire going in the fireplace in the old sitting room, but the logs were scrawny and the draft was bad, and the flames seemed to grudge us their warmth, so that we shivered all through the day. We're glad when night came and we could escape to the meager comfort of the drafty bedrooms. And in the summer, there was a dampness about the place. An unhealthy clamminess drifted from the walls and stirred uneasily among the ancient smells of decay that clung to the place. Well, I suppose you could call old Heinz a said you didn't know him? An immigrant from the Rhineland sometime in the early 70s. That would make him, let me see, how old?
Ich war im Rheinland geboren. In der Jahrzeit 1862.
That's right, 1862. He was an old man, but he never appeared old. You might have taken him for a vigorous man of 60. His hair and his scraggly mustache were jet black. I suspect he dyed them regularly. And his blue eyes seemed as keen as those of a boy of 18. And he'd never been away from the house for a single night, he used to say, from the day he bought it and moved into it in 1888. And it was an old house then. Yes, I spent some very dreary days and nights in that house. Huh? I couldn't afford a better place to live. Oh, people don't go to live in a haunted house if they can find another place, you know. Oh, yes, of course, I'd heard it was haunted before I went there to live. Do you believe in haunted houses? No. Neither did I, of course. Well, I agree, it did look like a haunted house. I've told you about the sounds in the night. I've told you about some of the sounds in the night. Yes, of course, there were other sounds. Well, please, let me tell it my own way. Well, Clarissa, for instance. Clarissa in particular. Clarissa above everything else. I had lived there nearly a year. Heinz and I sat that first night alongside the fireplace. I remember he'd asked me to share a bottle of Ben Custer Doctor with him. We sat in front of the stingy little fire. And there was a kerosene lamp on the table, and Heinz in his old black coat with the sleeves that were too short.
You like the wine then, Jesse?
Yeah, very much. Very much.
I have not much left. This is from before the war when it was easier to get, you see. But now, well, it is almost their last.
You shouldn't be so generous with it, Heinz.
No. Good wine always schmeckt besser, wenn with a friend you drink it, nicht wahr? A little more?
Not for a moment, thanks.
Yes, to sit by the fire and look down into the coals and see images of the scenes past. Drink wine and see the images grow clearer. It is good in the old age.
You've lived here alone for a long time?
Yeah, for a long time. Long time. I'm used to it. Used to the nights and the little fire and the silences.
Yes.
It is cold for this time of the year.
Listen.
What's the rose?
Oh, I thought I heard someone singing.
So?
Did you hear anything?
It is Clarissa.
What did you say?
Clarissa, my daughter.
Well, I didn't know you had a daughter, Heinz.
Yes. Willst du more wine?
No, thanks. I haven't seen her around.
No.
Well, is she... Excuse me, Heinz.
You will forgive me, Jesse. She's a child. I do not wish you to be bothered.
Why, she wouldn't bother me, Heinz. I like children.
There's enough left here in the bottle for one more for each of us, huh?
Thank you, Heinz.
And yes, schlaf wohl.
And I drank the last of the wine with the old man. And then I climbed the creaking stairs to the dreary little room, carrying a kerosene lamp in one hand and casting fabulous shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Seeing the ancient plush-covered rocking chair nodding away at me as I entered the room, as if a startled occupant had suddenly deserted it at the sound of my footsteps on the stairs. And the cold spring rain drenching the window panes, and the murmured complaints of the beams and rafters of the old house. The pleasant The musty fumes of the wine I had drunk kept sleep away for a while when I'd blown out the lamp. The melody of that children's song flowed again across my mind as I lay there. My thoughts wandered to the lonely child that dwelt in the haunted house with the old man and the newcome student. I smiled to myself as I thought, now that settles the question of the house being haunted, doesn't it? People have heard the little girl singing to herself in the night. They've not known that a little girl lived here too. Yeah, that's the ghost. And I smiled again at superstitions. And another idle thought struck me. I wondered at the child's age. 10 or 12 years old by the sound of her voice. And somewhere in the back of my drowsy mind, I seem to remember that Heinz had told me Helena, his wife, had died. Well, was it the year of the San Francisco earthquake? Well, that would be 1906. That would be 42 years ago. And this was a child of 10 or 12. I must have been mistaken. I was getting sleepy. The wine, the rain, the dark. I slept. Well, you wanted the whole story. I'm telling it to you. In the morning, Heinz was working in his garden, and the early sun made the old house seem a little more cheerful, a little more livable. There was a tinge of green through the gray of the fields that surround the house, and Heinz told me he'd seen a robin. I stood and watched him a long time, and I don't think he noticed how my eyes wandered to the windows of the old house, searching for a flash of color that might be a child's hair ribbon, or how I listened for the sound of a young voice singing a little song the children who danced so long ago on the bridges of Avignon. I didn't even notice that I was humming a song under my breath. Shirley Paul,
Clarissa's song, eh?
What? Oh.
Well, that's Clarissa's song.
That kid used to sing it when I was young.
Yeah, my wife is French. She taught the song to Clarissa.
Oh?
Yeah, it is an old song.
How old is your daughter, Heinz?
Eh?
How old?
Oh, she's young.
Is she pretty?
Oh, yeah. Your breakfast?
Coffee. I found it on the stove.
Clarissa made it.
Oh, did she?
You'd better go to work now, huh?
Yes, I suppose so. You don't need to keep the little girl out of sight on my account, Heinz. I like children.
Oh, she bother you.
Oh, no, I've got a little sister back home.
Oh, yeah?
Miriam. She's 11.
Clarissa is older.
Oh? Miriam's got bright yellow hair.
Clarissa has dark hair.
Yeah, I got a picture of her here.
Oh, so? Oh, she's very pretty. I have no picture of Clarissa.
No, that's too bad.
Well, I'll see you tonight, huh?
Yes? Yes, sure, Heinz. I should have let the thing drop then and there. If the old man felt that children should be kept away from adults, that was his privilege, of course. And although I was often lonely for other company than the old man, I was a dweller in his house, naturally subject to his wishes. My work? No, I never left the place. My book? Oh, I was writing a book. No, not very exciting. Mathematics. I have some theories. No, the book is gone. The fire, you remember? I could understand Heinz. I thought he obviously had a great respect for a man's work, especially a work of such apparent erudition. I must not be disturbed. I might stay in my room day and night with my slide rules and my profile paper and my broken flower pot full of sharpened pencils. I was not to be disturbed. But how many times I wished for the happy sound of my little sister Miriam's gay laughter. Found myself listening for the lilt of the little girl song that she used to sing, and that Clarissa knew too. Heinz mentioned Clarissa occasionally.
I sometimes wish that I could have sent Clarissa to school, you Jesse.
Well, it's too bad you didn't.
Always there was never enough money.
Why, there are schools. Public schools, Heinz.
No, not for Clarissa's free schools.
You know, I wonder.
Wonder?
Well, children are supposed to go to school. I'm surprised that the school authorities haven't been to see about sending her.
The police?
Oh, no, not the police. But there are laws about schools. I mean, you might find yourself in trouble if they discover you have a daughter school age.
They will come here.
Well, if they find out.
Jesse, you will not tell.
Now, look here, Heinz. You're not being fair to the child.
Yes.
No, really, I mean it. Hasn't she ever been to school?
Well, I teach her a little.
Well, Heinz, it's none of my business. But you're doing her a very serious harm.
No. Listen, Jesse. You don't tell anybody about them.
Well, I don't know, Heinz. If they come and ask me...
Jesse, listen. I tell you something.
Well?
Clarissa can't go to school.
Well, why not? I told you it doesn't cost anything.
It is not that.
Well, then?
She's not well.
Oh. Oh, I'm sorry, Heinz. Look, would you like it if I gave her a little of my time and taught her some of the elementary...
No, please,
Well, I'd be glad to.
No.
Well, have it your way, Heinz. I don't mean to intrude on your affairs, but after all, a child...
I'm sorry, Jesse. I thank you, but no.
All right. Forget it. But I couldn't forget it. A kindly old man. Yes, he was kindly. And a sick child who had never seen the inside of a schoolroom and was growing up to become... well, what? In an ancient, moldering house, a house that had lived too long, alone with a father born 86 years ago. Alone at night in the darkness with the house grumbling and complaining around me. I thought about the plight of the child. Sometimes I could hear her song far away somewhere in the dank recesses of that crumbling house. And my thoughts revolved again about this mystery. Heinz said she was not well. Heinz would not allow her to appear. Was Clarissa some misshapen monster child that she must be pent up and never see the sun? Was she... I detest mysteries of that kind. I love the good, clean mysteries of abscissa and ordinate, the logarithm and antilogarithm of the calculus and the grand old theorems devised by the ancients. But the fascinating mysteries of the human mind and of human behavior are alien to me. Them I hate. And my thoughts crept further and further away from the 10 numbers as doubt and speculation about the child laid hold of my mind. In the night, how often I heard her sobs, I thought, sometimes close outside my door. And yet when I opened the door, there was nothing. And old Heinz grew more and more taciturn. He never spoke of his daughter. He seemed to avoid me by day and to disappear by night. But the summer came then, and the fall, and winter. My book was going badly, and my thoughts wandered. I must leave this place, I thought, or find out this mystery. And again I asked the old man if there was not something I might do for this pathetic child, this invisible, haunting voice.
No, Jesse. There is nothing you could do.
But Christmas is coming, Heinz. What can I get her for Christmas?
No, why not, Jesse?
What?
My Helene. She died on the eve of Christmas.
Well, but Heinz, you owe it to the child.
No. Let us not speak of it again.
But to me, the thought of Christmas passing by this child was unspeakable. I determined that if the old man would do nothing about it, I would. You know, I had little money. There was so little I could do. But I did come into the town here, and I found a toy for her. I found one I could afford. A little woolly lamb Christmas to Clarissa. And on Christmas Eve, Heinz and I shared the last bottle of Ben Kostler Doctor before the miserly little fire. And I gave him one of the handkerchiefs my little sister Miriam had sent me, and he gave me an old stone Krug with a heavy pewter top that he said came from Heidelberg. And we regretted that there was no creamy Pilsner Urquell to drink from it. Wished each other a happy Christmas. And then, in the night, I was awakened by a tiny sound. And I lay awake silently for a moment. And there was another sound. A hesitant little footstep. And the rustling at the dresser across the room from me. And I lay quietly and listened. Is that you, Clarissa? Is that you, Clarissa? Do you like it? Good. Happy Christmas. I'm sorry, that's all I could get you. But I hope you like it. And I felt the touch of a tiny hand on my shoulder, and lips brushed my cheek, and the door closed. And the sound of her voice in the little song was happier now than I'd ever heard it. And so I knew at last that Clarissa was not a ghost, but a living person. And I felt more at peace with myself as I realized that this was what had been plucking at the corners of my mind. And I was happy now that I knew she really lived, that I was not living in the midst of fantasy. I had wondered what Heinz would say. He was perfectly natural about it.
It was good of you, Jesse.
Good? What?
To find a gift for Clarissa.
Oh, did you like it?
Ah.
Well, I'm glad.
She asked me to say Dankeschön to you.
Well, then I say, bitte schön.
It is good. You're a kind person, Jesse.
I wish it could have been more.
Oh, it is a very rich gift. Never has she had such a thing.
Is she going to have Christmas dinner with us, Heinz?
No.
So, I had won a little victory in this conflict with the darkness. But I was to go no further. I asked Heinz about her. Heinz answered shortly. I suggested that a birthday gift might be in order if I only knew her birthday. I proposed writing to my own sister and begging her for outworn storybooks that Clarissa might read, even if she must stay aloof from the rest of the house. Heinz did not reply. Everything was as it had always been, so long as the name of Clarissa was not mentioned. But when it came in the late spring, when it was cold and windy again, and the raw snow pelted against the windows and the whole house shivered, I heard her crying again in the night. And there was a quality in her voice this time that brought me out of the bed and into the hall. I called in alarm. Clarissa! I stepped back into my room and lit the kerosene lamp. And as I stepped out again toward the hallway, Heinz confronted me.
What's my say, Jesse?
Why, can't you hear her, Heinz? Something's wrong, she's sick.
No, go back by your room, Jesse.
Oh, but Heinz!
No, Peter, Jesse. Go back.
Now, Heinz, listen to me. Something's awfully wrong with that child, and
I will take care of her, Jesse.
Please,
In
Heinz.
your room.
Now, see here,
I take care of my own man, huh? Heinz.
I reached for the door at once, but it was locked from the outside. And I beat on it and stormed at it in the cold. but for once it held. I screamed at the father, threatening every kind of vengeance on him, till at last I suddenly realized that I was being hysterically silly. In the silence, I could hear nothing but the moan of the wind around the rusty cornices of the house and the hiss of snowflakes against the window. And I sat down, shaken, bitter at myself for giving way to such an outburst over a child's crying in the night. And at last I lay down again, and in the frosty silence of the early dawn, I fell asleep. And when I awoke, hours later, and found my door unlocked again, Heinz was not to be found. Not that day, nor the next. I tramped through the house, opening doors, calling him, calling Clarissa. There was not a sound to answer me. I found a little wood and made a miserable fire. I suppose I ate. I don't remember any too well. And at night I went to bed, to lie shivering for hours, straining my ears for a sound. The sound of a child's song. The sound of a father's footstep in the cold darkness. And it was morning, nearly morning. Gray fingers of morning plucking at the frost-rimed windows. And I awoke to see Heinz standing beside my bed. In the 2 days, he seemed to have aged 20 years. He was an old, old man. He spoke to me.
Jesse, my friend.
What's the matter, Heinz?
No much matter, Jesse. I am dying.
Heinz!
It is finished now, Jesse. Alles is vorüber.
Well, here, sit down.
No. Hear me. See, the key to Clarissa's room. You take it.
Oh, is she all right? Heinz!
Too late for me now. Go. Clarissa's room. Do what is to be done.
I lifted him to the bed. I bent over him. I listened for his heart. There was no sound. Heinz was dead. Yes, just as I told you before, he died. He died there in my room, yes. What? Oh, yes. In the little half-light, I found the kerosene lamp and I lit it. I took the key from the floor where he dropped it. No. I found the room very easily. It was at the far end of the hall. I called, Clarissa? Clarissa? And there was no answer. So I unlocked the door. And holding the light above my head, I walked over to the bed. And there, lying on the bed, dressed in a pinafore that might have come out of a 10-year-old drawing in Alice in Wonderland, clutching a little woolly lamb to her breast, there lay a tiny, old woman with long white hair braided into pigtails. Clarissa. And I knew why I hadn't heard the little song for 2 days. And so when the lamp dropped out of my hand and the flames started licking around the dry as dust draperies and the fragile old oaken boards in the floor, I turned and went out of the house. Well, what else was there to do? The house had lived too long. And so had the father and daughter who dwelt there. for tonight was called Clarissa. The man who spoke to you was Ernest Chappell. And Heinz was played by Bruno Vick. Clarissa by Peggy Stanley. As usual, music for Quiet Please is by Albert Berman. Now a word from our writer-director, Willis Cooper.
The characters in tonight's Quiet Please are neither living nor dead. They enjoy neither of these interesting conditions because they're solely the invention of my own imagination, intended to represent nobody at all. Quiet Please for next week is called 13 and 8.
And so, until next week at the same time, I am quietly yours, Ernest Chappell.
That was Clarissa from Quiet Please, here on the Mysterious Old Radio Listening Society podcast. Once again, I'm Eric.
I'm Tim.
And I'm Joshua.
That was a listener request going into our listener library from Anna, who said nice things and then wanted us to listen to Clarissa from Quiet Please, and then said, because I would love to hear what you think actually happened in the story. And that's really disappointing because, Anna, I was hoping you would tell me. I do have some thoughts.
Save it for the podcast.
Wait. It was alluded to in our intro that people make the mistake that Quiet Please is horror. And it's all over the map. It's storytelling, period. Willis Cooper didn't constrict himself to any genre. He just wanted to write a story. For me, this one was actually really truly spooky and had me on the edge of my seat for a good portion of it, not knowing really what was going to happen. And nothing happened that I thought, that I guessed would happen. So that idea of hoping for me that, please be a scary Quiet Please. I finally got one. Instead of, what do you mean they all turn into flowers?
That's super scary. But
if that happened in real life, you would scream like a baby.
God, that's a good point.
Is that why baby screams? Because they're just like, did you just turn into a flower? No, I left the room. I'm off the topic, but...
So, Joshua, being a Quiet Please huge fan, probably the biggest in this room, other than
Talking
Tim's.
about my weight again?
Yeah.
Certainly the loudest Quiet Please fan.
I love it!
Had you heard this one before?
No, I have not. I ration Quiet Please. I am very careful with it. So, pretty much, I think I have used up almost all the Quiet Pleases I've heard on this podcast. There are a few that I've heard that we haven't discussed, but the rest of them I'm just saving to listen for the first time for the podcast, or if a listener like Anna brings it.
Smart. I don't know where you have time to listen to any other radio shows other than what we're assigned in this.
Radio is great because you can listen and do other things. Do you just stand perfectly still in the center of your house while listening to radio?
I know. When I listen to radio and do other things, all right, stop, go back.
Yep.
Okay, start it over.
That is me, too. I have to stand perfectly still and listen. No, I can't do other things.
I spent years listening to audiobooks when I had small children. So I learned to be able to process information in an audio form and still, while changing diapers.
Carefully listen to audio and then somehow kind of change diapers.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I got used to paying attention to the audio and not my children.
When you said, when I had small children, I thought there was a quote from Lucy from Dracula.
Do you think she was listening to audio as she was going around stealing children?
Well, yeah.
We're going to do anything but talk about this episode.
No. Had you heard it, Tim?
No.
I think we should start with what we think happened, because I'm just dying to find out. To me, it's his daughter, right? Mm-hmm. And she lives with him, and for whatever reason, never left the house. And just grew old with him, right? I mean, it's not a ghost.
That's how I read it.
Yes. Okay.
Well.
That is the twist. It's a ghost story
that isn't
without a ghost, because it's told very much in the style of a ghost story, which is what I enjoy about it.
Specifically to my ear, kind of a riff on the fall of the House of Usher.
Yes, there's that as well.
It really leads you down the path of, here we go, scary ghost story. And he even talks about ghosts. And it's that they really set you up for it to be a child ghost, that he's hiding the fact from him, which makes for a lovely twist. Other than his acceptance of all of this was more unnerving than what was happening.
There, I thought Cooper did a really clever thing. There was no accident that he was a mathematician, A.
Yes.
And B, working on a book that just kept him holed up in his room for days and days and days at a time. So it also suggested that, he had himself rather cut off from the rest of the house.
Yes.
But also he says he's more comfortable with logarithms and anti-logarithms or whatever he was talking about.
You're a logarithm.
And that he didn't understand the mystery of human connection. And I think that's really important to that point, that otherwise you would wonder why he didn't do something.
And he tried. He did say, yeah, if they come here, I'm going to have to tell on you. There was a lot of that. But not getting freaked out. Well, it's his choice. Back to my room. Like that part of it was as sinister as the rest of it.
Said that horror stories, many of them, are essentially stories about bad roommates.
Right.
And that in this case, like, he's a tenant and he's real respectful. So it's the opposite of a horror story. It's about a really respectful tenant.
I also made note, a spoiler, when you open up your wooden goat for Christmas this year, because that's what I'm getting you guys, a little goat with a...
Wasn't it a lamb?
Lamb, sorry, goat, lamb.
Well, now I want a goat.
Yeah.
You promised me a wooden goat.
We get wooden goats.
Everybody who works on a farm that listens to this podcast just went, ugh. Whatever. Goat, lamb, whatever.
All our goat audience is real mad.
Really did. The cheese from each is very different.
I don't want cheese from either one of that.
You're as small-minded about cheese as you are about old-time radio.
I'm small-minded about everything. You know what I like? Cow cheese. It's good. Well, you don't have to invent anything else. Stop pulling on things on animals and taking what comes out of them and turning it into cheese.
The one thing that in this, that by the end, it seemed like that is the one sort of vague, indecipherable, maybe mysterious, saying the same things over and over again, is why this daughter reached a certain age and behavior-wise never aged any further than that.
And I think that's Anna's question.
But just to make sure, let's maybe elaborate on our interpretation. The idea to me is that he suspects it's a ghost, as we said. At the end, he finds Clarissa laid out. She's an old woman, but still dressed as a child. And to Tim's Fall of the House of Usher comment, there could be some supernatural quality there in the end, that they both seem to die at the same time.
Right.
Hines appears as if he's aged 20 years, and then the house is burned down, and the main character says the house has lived too long as well.
Yeah.
But doing the math, since there's a mathematician in it, I think you could read this that the precipitating event was the death of her mother, and that she... psychologically stayed at the age roughly that her mother died, because he does mention that when he gets distressed about her receiving a Christmas present, that her mom passed away
Christmas Eve.
And so that made me think, and then he tries to do the math on how old.
42 years.
42 years. And then if you think, she's maybe around 12 or so, that would put her at like 54 when he finds her in the room dead, which says her hair is gray. But then we also have the comment that Hines looks like he aged 20 years.
And I took that as a signifying the 2 days of trauma he went through while his daughter was dying. That not a supernatural aging, but bags under the eyes. You know, we look older when we've had bad days.
When he first describes the appearance of Hines, like he has old guy. But that indicates he looks younger because he possibly dyes his hair and beard, and then has the eyes of an 18-year-old. So this young, sprightly behavior, but still probably an old guy that is making himself look younger.
Well, if you do the math again on when he says at the top when Hines was born, and this has to take place in 1948, I think there's something in here that verifies that. So he'd be in his 80s based on the age.
I thought they actually called his age out like 86.
Oh, maybe they do, yeah.
I'd be wrong about that.
So yes, that's how I interpreted it, and specifically that it was connected to her mother's death. Because also she's singing the song that was taught to her by her mother, and they underscore that a lot. But back to Tim's point about his young eyes and the narrator carefully says, I assumed he dyed his hair.
Right.
That's what called out to me when he said he
Right.
aged 20 years, that there might be something supernatural going on, because then he points out the gray hair on Clarissa. I don't think that's definitive, but that's a lot of attention to his hair and the color of people's hair. And then also the narrator says his sister is a blonde. Hines says, oh, my Clarissa has dark hair.
Yeah.
So there's something important going on in there, I think.
Well, when Anna says, our listener, I want to hear what you guys think was going on, to me, we've come to a pretty cut and dry conclusion, the three of us. What are the other options that it could be? Because I don't really see any other option than what we've just discussed for this story.
I mean, I think you'd have to really struggle to read it any other way.
Yeah.
Although Willis Cooper's outro of these characters are neither alive nor dead. They exist in my imagination. That could just be being glib, but it's also that it's meant to be ambiguous in a sort of limbo state in this shell of a house.
And because there's so much strange stuff about both their age, I think that's where you could read into something at the very least supernatural. And he keeps talking about ghosts. But a lot of that just doesn't add up. The other reason is...
I'm sorry to interrupt, but at the outro said, both the house and its inhabitants had lived too long.
Yes. So lived suggests they were alive, but that could also just be an expression as well. And clearly, Hines was alive because the framework is him being interrogated, presumably by the police or some other authority, about there was a dead body in here. But they only mention Hines. They don't mention finding the body of Clarissa, which goes to possibly being something supernatural.
I also assumed Hines was 57 years old. I knew I'd get it in.
That went over better with Tim than me. I just want to point that out.
Tim laughed. Joshua shot me the I'm going to edit that out glare.
Well, Tim loves ketchup. You were playing to your audience.
I could tell you some ketchup stories.
The other thing I wanted to point out that it goes against any sort of ghost is how upset or agitated Hines gets when the narrator intimates that by not sending her to school, authorities could come to his house. He was nervous about someone finding the physical Clarissa. I don't think you'd be worried about the police showing up and finding out you had a ghost of your daughter in the house.
If
you were keeping your disturbed adult daughter at home, they might take her away.
Also, though, it could be the fear of, well, you're going to find out I'm nuts. You're not going to believe me when I tell you that my daughter's a ghost living in the house, and you're going to take me away. So there is a two-edge to that, too.
Yep.
That's the line that is odd for me, that whatever state Clarissa is in, it is such that Hines feels comfortable enough to talk about it a little bit with the host, but never wants him to see her. So it's a mostly secret for some reason. It might be the fear of someone taking her away. Mm-hmm. But it's really extreme reaction, which is what makes it an interesting story, I suppose, is that really extreme reaction, but to mostly hide someone completely away from the world.
But if she's really 55, 60 years old and is still going around singing and giggling and speaking in a child's voice, I think it is fair to feel like there might be some stigma attached to that, or a fear of it from an 80-some-year-old man from a different country and a different time than
especially
the narrator.
A German guy.
Yeah, and this is 1948, so it's interesting even that it's a German. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that really is that relevant to the story. I couldn't...
I'm trying to remember, he immigrated, I thought they said like in 1880?
So a long time ago. So he's been in this country.
Yeah, lose the accent. Speaking of 5 or 6 minutes before I could acclimate to the actor's accent.
Yeah.
I could not understand him. And then I finally picked up on, it was like train spotting. Like, oh, I got the accent.
Exactly like train spotting.
Accent-wise. Not the bathroom scene. But when Clarissa crawled on the ceiling.
That was creepy.
That was creepy.
Although, back to something strange and supernatural, at the very top, when the narrator is trying to remember when Hines said he was born, there is a German voice that comes in. And this is after he's dead, as we find out. And I don't think that German voice, it sounds just like Hans, is not the person he's talking to.
I never really parsed out what that particular line was.
Well, it's in German. That's why you can't understand it. So I'm...
You looked it up.
No,
I learned German for the podcast. I'm not fluent.
Yeah, well, I have it on an audiobook, so it's really easy for me to learn.
And I vacuumed everybody's house in the neighborhood.
That's an odd structural thing, don't you think in that moment? Because it's the one time that happens. And so that sent me down this rabbit hole of trying to look at it through the idea that they were possibly both ghosts, or maybe now Heinz the ghost. But I think it is just a Cooperism. It's like playing with structure and is probably just a red herring.
Well, yeah, I think it's also just Cooper, like, okay, I'm going to have another actor in this, so I might as well do something interesting with him.
Yeah, but it's only that one moment.
Yeah.
Maybe it was like a nephew. Or somebody that won a contest.
I mean, we've talked so much about just figuring out the
Heinz
puzzle.
57 contest.
Yeah.
Win a cameo on A Quiet Please. Send in your labels.
Thank you, Adam, for sending this request.
For the yet to be invented Heinz 57. Or maybe it was. I don't know.
We've been making a lot of ketchup jokes.
Can we stop calling Heinz 57 ketchup? It's a whole other sauce.
What is it?
It's a sauce.
Is it in a ketchup?
I thought it was a ketchup.
It's just a sauce.
I mean, like a spiced ketchup.
Yeah, sure. Everything can be categorized as a ketchup if you want.
Anna, I'm so sorry about this episode.
We need parameters on what is ketchup. What do you think? A1's ketchup? A1's not ketchup.
No, A1 is not ketchup. It's like a poor man's Worcestershire sauce.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, right. Okay. Tim, tell him stuff. Let's get out of here.
We're getting into this condiment war here.
I love Worcestershire sauce.
I do too. I think it's superior to A1.
A1, yeah.
Sure.
All right. Well, we've established that.
So that's what's going on in this episode.
Yes.
So, Anna, here's your answer. Heinz 57 is not ketchup. A1's delicious. And Worcestershire, it's got its place.
In my mouth.
All right. Do we have anything else to say about the story?
No.
There's some small details
Sorry,
I always
Dad.
like to point out about Cooper's writing, and I just think some of the descriptions of the house are really
beautiful.
Oh, yeah. I mean, straight out of, like, he sounded like, I am one of the classic early 20th century writers.
Yeah, like turn of the century ghost stories. Just the descriptions of the house. Just some of his just small details he's so good at pulling out. He describes a broken flower pot full of sharpened pencils on his desk. And suddenly you saw what his whole little tiny room looked like, just based on that one little detail.
Yep.
Gray edges of dawn and the
I
light
thought
the kerosene lamp and the half lights.
Yeah, Cooper writes really well. Chappell delivers so eloquently that it's gorgeous to listen to him read.
The other thing I want to point out, just in the context of other radio shows in general, but specifically this type of genre story, is that this is a rare story that is about familial love from a purely masculine point of view. Because from this era, most of the time, if it's about family, there's always going to be a mother involved, right? It's not something that is looked at through the lens of the male. Right? So you have so much about the narrator missing his own sister, which is a great detail for many reasons. I mean, obviously, it humanizes him a little more, even though he says he's a mathematician and doesn't understand the mystery about human interactions. He clearly feels for his sister. It's also a nice little safety net to keep any quality of his obsession with wanting to meet and see this young girl as it being purely like, oh, you remind me of my sister who's far away and I miss you. And also, clearly there's something disturbing going on with the father and the daughter, but you never get the idea that it's creepy at all. Again, it's a story of a father's love for a daughter. And I can't think of another radio show about these subject matters that is just with two men.
Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but you're right that it's out of the norm for the time.
Another Willis Cooper move that I just like when he does it, and I stop doing that because it's so awesome, is when he gets to the story, like the old man died, and I picked up the key, and I'm talking a little bit, and then, oh yeah, right, you want to know what happened when I took the key to the room and found Clarissa. Like, yes, we want to know.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I got so engrossed by the story he was telling, it wasn't till the end that I remembered again, like, oh yeah, the house burns down and someone's dead.
Yeah.
Like, so that's really good, because he starts with this sort of heightened crime interrogation scene, right. And you'd think you'd remember that, but I didn't.
Oh, it's gone, right? I forgot until the very end. I went, oh, right, that was the opening. Who is he talking to? Does it matter? I just assumed he's talking to the audience, and the questions that the narrator's hearing are supposed to be questions that we as a listener would be asking. Mm-hmm. Or is it in the interrogation room of the police? Okay.
I think we're supposed to think he's being questioned by some authority, whether it's someone immediately there at the scene or if he's been taken to the police station later to answer these questions. Or,
all right,
I don't know who else would be asking him these tough questions.
His sister.
His sister. 11-year-old sister. I have another question.
Khrushchev.
Do you still have that lamb? Because this is how 11-year-old girls talk. I now do voices on the podcast, apparently.
Yeah, it was great. It was really, really.
I apologize. Yeah, I'm sorry.
It was a goat, by the way. Let's throw it to the vote. Tim, you get to start because you're looking at me.
All right.
I averted my eyes on purpose.
Quiet Please is always tough to categorize because it's always good. You can't necessarily fall in that trap of like, well, this is a typical sort of Quiet Please, so it's a good example, or it's an aberration, so it's interesting because of that, because they're
Quiet
all
Please is an aberration of itself every time.
I don't think I would call this one a classic. It's well-crafted, well-made, a fascinating study, but I think the whole package doesn't jump up the same way that other episodes of Quiet Please do.
I'm going to disagree and say that this is one of my favorite episodes of Quiet Please. Not only a classic against other Quiet Please, but I'm just going to call it a classic. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed not really knowing what was going on, and I thought the ending was satisfying.
Yeah, it is a gem of a story, but I could go either way, guys. But my initial instinct is to go with Tim. Is that it is a?
Is that right? Do you like Tim more? Is that?
Yeah, I said I meant my initial instinct always, not just in this episode. No, because and it isn't fair. It's competing with Thing on the Forable Board. Whence Came You and things. So it's not fair because if this were an episode of Mysterious Traveler, I'd probably say classic.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to not call every Quiet Please a classic because it elevates Quiet Please as a whole. Like the fact that this isn't a classic in my book just tells you how amazing all of Quiet Please is. This is sort of the standard he's set. So he has to go way above it to get the classic status. But
he so desperately wants.
But it's really, really good. It's simple and tender and surprising in these really small, subtle ways. It is a ghost story without a ghost, which is terribly fascinating concept. It is a confession in structure that turns into basically a eulogy by the end for this father and daughter, and it's just, I think, really beautiful. I may be talking myself into classic now. I really liked it, okay? Let's forget about categories and labeling things, people. It's a beautiful story. Thank you, Anna.
Way to get out of that.
You're welcome.
Tim, tell him stuff.
Hey, please go visit ghoulishdelights.com, home of this podcast. You'll find many other episodes there, including other episodes of Quiet Please, if you want to actually compare to see, do you think this is one of the best ones? Do you think this is the middle of the road? What do you think? You can
Do you think a lamb's a goat?
You can leave comments. You can send us messages. If you, like Anna, would like to send us a request for something you want us to listen to, send us a message. We'll add it to our list. You can link to our social media pages. You can link to our Threadless store to get some swag, or you can link to our Patreon page.
Yes, you can go to patreon.com/themorals. And I'm sorry, I just have to tell this story. Because we were talking about goats and sheep, and I'll take it out if it's not funny. But I run a fancy cheese department, and I once talked to a customer who honestly thought goats were males and sheeps were females. So was horrified by the idea of goat cheese because she was like, what? How did they make that? I can't remember what sort of labyrinth I went down to figure out why she was so confused by what goat cheese was made out of until he finally went, milk. And you went, milk? But goats are boys. Like,
It's almost
no.
almost as good as a story that just happened the other day where a young lady found out for the first time in her life at the gas station that the 87, 90, 91 was not the year the gas was made. Because she ordered, I would like the new gas.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Anyway, what's going on Patreon?
Patreon.com/themorals. You can support this podcast. So people who support this podcast get an episode with all the anecdotes cut out. So they don't have they just get to hear the old-time radio talk. So
They're 6 minutes long.
so please consider supporting this podcast. Thank you.
And if you'd like to see us performing live, you can see us doing audio theater live on stage by going to ghoulishdelights.com to find out where we're performing and what we're performing. We do old-time radio classic reenactments, and we also do a lot of our own original work. ghoulishdelights.com or mysteriousOldRadioListeningSociety.com. You can come see us or buy an online virtual ticket and see us from wherever you are in the world. What's coming up next?
Coming up next is my selection, Final Resting Place from the series Macabre. Until then.
Look out!
The music, the mood, the food, with something a little extra.
I get a kick out of you.
Heinz 57 sauce has a zesty, bold, exciting flavor that gives a little kick to all your favorite foods. Try Heinz 57 sauce.
'Cause I get a kick
It's like ketchup
out of you.
with a kick.
We are looking at how to pronounce sometimes confusing names from the UK. So make sure to stay tuned to the channel. How do you say it? Worcestershire. Stress on the first syllable. Worcestershire. Yeah, only 3 syllable. That's hard, isn't it? Worcestershire. Worcestershire as in Worcestershire sauce.